You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on an awesome guest. I am super excited about this writer-director, Danishka Esterhazy. Thanks for being on.
Happy to be here.
All right, so it's confession time. I watched Level 16 on Netflix, and what happens is I watch a show. If it's a really cool film, I'm like, well, now I have to try and get this director on and talk about it. We were able to reach out to you. We got you on the show. It's fantastic. Now, here's the confession. A friend of mine, Steve McLaren, he's a filmmaker. He said, dude, you've got to watch this crazy horror film called the Banana Splits movie, where they did a Banana Splits, like the real Banana Splits from the 70s, and they made a horror film. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So I watched it. I was like, it's wild, it's crazy, it's fun. And then I see your name on it, and I go, hold on a second. I'm already having her on the show. So then I do a deep dive. You did Slumber Party Massacre. You've got a hell of a portfolio under you.
Well, I'm trying. I'm out there making films. You know, it took me more than 10 years to get Level 16 greenlit. And I think I was at a pace there when I was starting with independent features where I was lucky to direct on set like every 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
But the last few years, that's really changed. And I've been able to get a lot more projects greenlit and a lot more work. And so it's very exciting. It's really happy to have all that patience pay off.
It's awesome to have a writer director on this show who's skyrocketing. You're on fire. You're making it happen, and you're getting bigger and bigger projects. So you just gave me a little bit of your origin story, but maybe walk me through what led you to Level 16.
Sure. I'm from Winnipeg, so I was a member of the Winnipeg Film Group, a little quirky film cooperative there, which is really, a great little system where we make short films and everybody volunteers on each other's films. So if I wanted to make a short film, everybody from the film group would come out and volunteer as my cast and crew. And then for the next few months, I'd be somebody's DP or AD or production designer or, make the coffee, whatever needed to be done. Everybody would take turns volunteering, and then we'd all get our films made. So that was a really great place to learn the craft. And that's where I started. And I took a ton of workshops there with, great local filmmakers like Sean Garrity and Guy Madden, and, learning the craft of everything. I took cinematography classes, writing classes, directing classes, acting classes, try to learn the whole thing. But my goal was to make feature films. And, it's a really big leap from short films to feature films. So, I was writing feature films and trying to get people interested in feature films. And I couldn't quite make the jump. I did some great training at the National Screen Institute in Winnipeg. And then I got accepted into the Canadian Film Centre in Toronto, which, is an extremely prestigious program, the Directors Lab. And I had to apply 3 times. I didn't even get shortlisted the first time. I got shortlisted the second time, and then I didn't make it in the third time, but I was the first runner-up.
Oh, wow.
And they said to me in the interview, they were like, this is a real honor that you're the first runner-up because you're almost guaranteed to get in next year, but we can't fit you in this year. And don't get your hopes up because no one ever drops out. But if someone drops out, you'll get to go in. Anyway, someone dropped out. So, everybody else had like 3 months to like pack up and move to Toronto and, raise the money for their tuition and everything. I got a call a week before classes started. I was in Vancouver at a film festival, and they said, someone dropped out. Can you be here in a week? And then you can be in the Director's Lab. And I said, yes. And I just dropped everything. I moved to Toronto. I lived in like an Airbnb until I found a shared apartment with like 5 other students. And and I went to the film center. And that, I think, was the beginning of a big change for me, because I've been making short films for years and years and years, really not getting anyone's attention, partly because, living in a smaller hub of filmmaking and not being in like LA or
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah.
And then so I did the film center, got introduced to more people in the larger industry. And then I came back to Manitoba and I made my first feature film, Blackfield, that was funded by Telefilm Canada.
Okay.
And so that was the big beginning, but it didn't, it's not like I was suddenly on fire. It took me another 3 years to make my second feature, and that was a micro budget. And then it took me another 5 years to make the next feature. But when I was at the film center, I wrote Level 16, and I thought it would be my first feature film. It ended up being my third feature film because it took so long to fund. But it was the kind of film I wanted to make. I wanted to write genre, science fiction, fantasy. That's what I wanted to do as a filmmaker. But I just couldn't get anyone to give me the money. So, I made a bunch of other stuff while I was waiting, and I worked on film sets, and I taught filmmaking, and, I worked as a PA, as a production coordinator, anything, while I was trying to get a break. And then, Level 16 finally got off the ground. It's funny because it took us so long to raise the money. I had a wonderful producer who never gave up, no matter how many times we got turned down for funding. And after all that work, we really only raised $1 million. So it's not like we had a gigantic bucket of money to play with. We had to be really creative. But, we made the film. It was the film I wanted to make. And it was accepted to premiere at Fantastic Fest. And I think that's just where everything started to change. I got to show the film at Fantastic Fest. And people, finally heard my name. And then I started to get more opportunity.
It's a great film. It's kind of almost like a dystopian sci-fi about girls who are living inside of this compound, and it's very regimented on everything they have to do, from brushing their teeth to where they sleep at night. And there's some kind of weirdness going on, and we don't know what it is. And I love the fact that we have that thriller aspect to it. And you've got a hell of a cast on there that have gone on to do some big stuff.
Oh yeah, I love my cast. I felt so lucky to find those actors: Katie Douglas and Selena Martin, and Sarah Candy. Of course, actually, I've worked with many times. We've made 3 films together. It was a great cast. Peter Outerbridge, I was so excited to work with him. Yeah, it was just a real joy to make it. It was, we didn't have a lot of time, we didn't have a lot of money, but everybody was really passionate about the project, and it was just a fulfillment, I guess, of like all of my childhood dreams in terms of storytelling. I grew up, I was a huge fan of science fiction and dystopian fiction, but I just didn't see a lot of those stories from a female point of view. There's usually no women in them, or maybe like one woman who's the love interest. And I just really wanted to make movies in that genre, but with more, women characters and more diversity of a woman's point of view within a dystopian setting. So I think when I first wrote the film, people thought it was weird and nobody understood it. But then after several years of funding rejections, Handmaid's Tale came out, the series. And I think that really changed the zeitgeist of how people understood dystopian fiction. And then suddenly I could go into meetings and it wasn't like my story wasn't totally weird. They were like, "Oh, feminist dystopian." I'm like, "Yeah, it's what I've been saying for a decade, but hey."
You're like ahead of the time.
I'm glad people get it now.
No, I love the fact that it's female centric, it's female centered. And it really shows the way you started it off. And this is what hit me is the girls are in line to brush their teeth, and they're being monitored by a camera, and the faceless doctor for part of the film, which is all deliberate. You're creating that big brother like aspect of it, and I love that. But what grabbed me was they're all in line, something happens, and the central character, she steps out of line, and that's where she gets punished for it. And I love that, because you're really showing the subtext there of what happens if a girl steps out of what the expected routine is. And I thought it was really well done.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was a fun way to explore, the history of patriarchy and social culture. I read a lot of Victorian girls' etiquette books as I was designing that. that world. Yeah, and they're so haunting and disturbing, really, like the advice in the 19th century on how to be a good girl. It's just like basically pure slavery with like a little sugar on top. It's just this, it's so sad, it's a repress everything about your individuality, in no way take leadership of your life in any way, and that's the way you'll be successful and loved. And I think, even though we think of ourselves as being so removed from, say, Victorian culture, or mid 20th century culture, so many of those values are still really internalized
Oh
in
yeah.
so much of how we behave.
Hmm. Yeah, gender is definitely defined through that as well. So what? I don't want to give away the big twist, but obviously, because I want people to watch the film. So it's
But
on
here,
Netflix.
spoilers right now. Stop
Oh
the
yeah,
scene if you haven't
spoiler
watched
alert! All
it.
right, this is what I thought was really cool, is because you don't know where the film is going, right? So you're like wondering what's going on, and then you find out that the girls are asleep for most of the day, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And there's like little clues, like they have bed sores, right? Like old people would have bed sores if they're not turned enough at their homes or in the hospital. I thought that was really a great addition to again the thriller aspect. Like you would paint in little things throughout the film of this mystery, and then the reveal is that they're just in this compound led by these gangsters that don't have enough money to keep paying staff to take care of these girls, so they knock them out for most of the day.
Yeah, the economic realities of a black market facility. I really wanted the story to be grounded in reality, and and it's just be in the very near future, a few years from now. So the
Yeah.
science isn't supposed to be super sophisticated. The resources aren't endless.
Hmm.
It's not a Star Trek world; it's our world, and
Yeah.
these are criminals. And how would they run this kind of operation? So, when I first started writing this story, it was because the world's first face transplant had just happened in France.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was in all the news because it was the very first time it had been successful,
Yeah.
and it's funny because in the 10 years of rewriting and pitching this story, by the time we actually made the film, there'd been, I don't know, like a dozen face transplants that had been successful, and the technique had gotten quite a bit more sophisticated. So, when I was originally saying, well, this is, just a few years in the future when the technique is gotten quite a bit improved, it was already improving while I was writing the script.
Yeah.
So, the whole idea that you'd have to take immunosuppression drugs because it's a
Hmm.
form of organ donation, skin is an organ. It's all very real. But when I'd get story notes from various funders and places I was pitching it, they were like, "Oh, why don't they just put the girls in suspended animation?" And I'm like, "Well, because that's not a real thing. Like, this is now, right? It's
Yeah.
not 2,000 years in the future. That's actually, they don't have those facilities.
Yeah. No.
This is what they have. They have sleeping pills and they have bed sores."
Yep. No, I thought it was good, and in the big reveal that the girls are essentially they get skinned and
Yeah.
sold. Their faces end up on some rich debutante, which I thought was fascinating. Seeing the rich older couple and how the dynamic between them played out.
Yeah, well, originally I wanted to explore that dynamic a lot more. It's funny, I just recently finished watching Squid Game, and there were so many scenes in Squid Game that have been, just by coincidence, in my original drafts of
Oh,
this
really?
story. Yeah, where where the patrons come to a big fancy party to view the girls, and there's like champagne and
Oh, that
masks and
makes sense.
all this stuff, and
Yeah.
it was going to be really quite an epic exploration of what are we today, and would we do something this evil? And I think the answer is yes. Power corrupts, absolutely. Money corrupts, absolutely. And there's people out there with money who are ruthless, and we're not that far from this kind of criminal behavior. Hopefully, it's something that will never happen. But it's not a big stretch
I
morally,
don't
I think.
I don't know. After the past couple of years, it's easy to lose faith in humanity.
It really
so
is. No,
so
it
I
really
get
is.
it.
It's disturbing, right?
I
Yeah.
understand completely where you're coming from. So sometimes I'm like, I just gotta hold out hope. But I get it.
But then
So
budget wise, like I couldn't do this big fancy patron party. So that
yeah,
was one of the first things I had to cut because it was going to have really gorgeous costumes on all the
gotcha.
rich people and stuff. So it had to come down to one couple. So I had to have one scene only where I could explore like the complexities of this
Hmm.
kind of behavior. A woman who's willing to kill another woman to, to get back her youth,
It's
to
so
preserve
messed
her.
up.
Yeah, and a man who would encourage that. So yeah, it's really disturbing. And if there'd been more time and more money, there would have been various different couples with different motivations. But I
Right.
hoped that there was enough layers in that one scene to fill the story.
No, it was good because I kept getting like, okay, where are we going? Where are we going with it? Are they slaves? Are they harvesting their organs? Because I was thinking that's what was going on.
I was
But
really
no,
trying to
they're
misdirect people into
it was
sexual
you did
slavery. I was really hoping that people just thought it was just trafficking, prostitution, and then
right.
to bring so there'd be more of a surprise.
I think you were nailing that, especially with the creepy security guard guy. So I think that was
Right, right.
definitely coming off. Yeah. Level 16 on Netflix. I mean, watch it. I know we just had a bunch of spoilers. It's totally worth it though. It's got such a great tone to it, especially wherever you filmed it at. That had to be you didn't make that set. That had to be some kind of a compound, right?
We built, we shot it in Toronto and Hamilton, and our main set was an old police station that was no longer in service that the city of Toronto lent to us. It was quite
Amazing.
fantastic. It's so those are like real bars and real cop rooms and all those offices and
Wow.
stuff that we redressed. So they said you can have this building. It's like a three-story building, which we tried to make like it look like it was 16 floors. And they were like, you can do anything you want. You can paint it. You can build things. We had to construct the box
Yeah.
where Vivian is locked in, and we had to run the place. So it was super generous of the city, and it was great because that particular building had been built in the 1930s, and obviously it was an institutional building, a police station. So it had all the kinds of things I wanted the school to look like, which was a
Perfect.
repurposed, you know, um, institutional building.
Right.
I thought maybe we'd find an old school or hospital that we'd repurpose, but this was perfect. It was meant to be. They're in Belarus. They've bought an old abandoned building. They've, slapped on some paint, spent the least money if possible, locked all the doors, boarded all the windows, and that's exactly what it would look like.
So is the level correspondent with the age of the girls?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time writing the backstory, where the girls were purchased and how long they lived there, and most of them come into level 3 or level 4. They find them in poor communities around the world, where poverty would um, drive parents to sell their children, which
Okay.
unfortunately is something that happens. It's a reality, and
Yeah,
not
it
in this
is.
not in this maybe organized way for this particular purpose, but it's still child trafficking is a
No, this
reality.
is a real thing.
Yeah, so they come in at 3 or 4, so they have vague memories of their life, but then they become they're drugged, and they're given sedatives, and they're given brainwashing education, and by the time they get to level 16, it's really the only world they remember, and they barely remember being outside
Yeah.
because they're kept indoors the entire time, which makes their skin more perfect and also prevents them from being discovered. So
Right.
yeah, that's the concept.
I love the fact that you have such a deep backstory for it. I think sometimes writers get out there and they just start writing, and having that deep backstory really does give you that emotional content that the characters can have throughout the story.
I think it's so important, and I'm always shocked. I work quite a lot in television these days, and maybe because the tight schedules, but there's so rarely in television do the writers have the time or the interest in developing really deep backstories. And I always find it's a mistake, because you will end up with these plot holes you have to find
Yeah.
and discover as the show is developed. Whereas I find in independent feature films, there's usually so much more time spent in that backstory. And I really love reading screenplays by people who come from a theater background, because they
Mm.
really get that. Like, they dig into those character biographies like nobody. Someone who comes from theater is going to give you a really rich backstory, which I like a lot.
That's awesome. Danishka, is there anything in general that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
Ooh, I don't know.
This is your
Well,
platform, madam. I'm just a guy in a chair.
well, we talked about level 16. Um, we could talk about Slumber Party. I mean, I didn't write it, but I did direct it. And that's out in the world right now, which is a
Yeah,
lot of
sure.
fun.
Hit me with it.
Okay, Slumber Party Massacre. Well, Slumber Party is a pretty cool project because it was my first opportunity to do, I guess, a remake or a retelling to step into a world where the story world is a franchise, and there's already 3 films,
Yeah.
and there's a fan base and a culture and an understanding of who these characters are, and to have a chance to add a new chapter to
Nice.
that kind of world. So I was really excited by that idea. I'm a little terrified too, I guess, because when you have a story that already has fans, it's pretty easy to it's for people to be disappointed and angry. Actually, in the Banana Splits movie, there was all these people who loved the Banana Splits as children and were super not happy about it becoming a horror movie.
I don't even like, I feel like the Banana Splits movie, between you and me, is a whole nother episode where I want to sit down and just be like, how the hell did this project happen? But
it's pretty crazy and fun. And there's all these weird reactions to it on social media. It's so weird because it has a lot in common with Five Nights at Freddy's. And so the Five Nights at Freddy's fans developed all these weird conspiracy theories about how the screenplay got developed. No, it's crazy. And I'll read this stuff on the internet. And they'll be like, I hear the screenplay was written here and by this person. I'm like, that's totally not true. I was there.
Hey, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter by using my handle @ScreenwriterPod. And if you liked the show, please support it by subscribing and sharing the episode on your social media.